One of the most influential developments and views of human personality would be found in the social cognitive area of personality. And essentially, one of the key person here, which you'll hear this guy in a variety of areas, particularly when we look into the social psych area as well, is Albert Bandura. And essentially what he proposed was the interaction between my thoughts and how I appraise the world around me, of my traits, so interaction of cognitive appraisal of my traits that we've been talking a little bit about. He doesn't deny the importance of those. And then finally, the situation, which also includes the social situation, which has a huge impact really on how we see the world around us, really. So the social cognitive theorists believe we learn many of our behaviors either through conditioning or by observing and imitating others. So the key influences in social cognitive is by direct conditioning. Bandura looked a lot at imitation, and so behavioral conditioning is a key influencer when it comes to social cognitive, and also the power of modeling would actually be a way of putting imitation and observation, or observational learning is another term that oftentimes is used to talk about social cognitive behavior, observation learning. One of one important term is what we refer to as reciprocal determinism, and this is one example of what I've said to you guys before about how important terms are. Get my O there. And reciprocal determinism talks about the interacting influences between personality and environmental factors. And so the interactive influence between personality and environmental factors. Now, let me explain this a little bit. If you're not familiar, when we talk about interaction, if you think about an experiment where I have two things that I apply to the subject. Let's say that I take you into a situation and I give you a personality test, so I find out how you're wired by, let's just take, for example, the big five, okay? And I have that clearly in mind, but then I put you in a situation where you have to make certain decisions. Well, the interaction between your personality and the environment produces a third outcome. So in a sense, one multiplies on the other, and this third outcome isn't just the addition of personality and environment, it's a third thing, literally, when we talk about this. So in experimental terms, we have A, which is the main effect if you want to talk about personality. We have B, which is the environment, and I can describe whatever the environment is, whether it's a schoolroom or whether it's a submarine, where a lot of times they will test submarine captains under the situation. And then we have this third thing, which is not just one or the other, it's the multiplication of the two, and that's what we refer to as interaction. And this effect oftentimes is equal to or greater than either one of these things by themselves. Make my arrow here. By themselves. So you can have, let's just say that I rate the personality and it has a impact of 2.0 out of 10. And I look at the environment and it has a impact of 5.0 out of 10. The interaction could be 8.0 out of 10, partly because it amplifies both of these things, and it's a third main effect. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about interactive influence between the personality and the environmental influences that go on. Interactions between individuals and environments occur when different people choose different environments, and when our personalities shape how we interpret and react to those events, and when our personalities help create situations to which we react. So, for example, another good example would be a child's personality with the parent's personality. If the kid's fairly laid back and he has one parent that's also laid back, they get along pretty well. They don't clash. They kind of work in rhythm. But then you have a more high-strung parent, and this parent looks at that child and says, "You're lazy. You're good for nothing. You can't get anything done. You never follow through, etc." Coming from their particular perspective. And so you have this interactive effect up here that is demonstrated in this triangle, where each one of these things impact each other. So the behavior of learning to climb impact thoughts and feelings about doing risky behaviors and activities. These internal factors impact the kind of friends that I hang out with, and these friends will perpetuate that behavior in whatever way they see fit. So all of these things interact and are quite important when we're actually talking about the social cognitive perspective. Reciprocal determinism is a key term to understand when we're talking about that. The other one, which happens, is also the concept, and we've talked a little bit about this already, is the concept of personal control. And I think I've mentioned the difference between an internal locus of control, ILOC, L, that's an L, not a C, or an external locus of control. And oftentimes we adopt a certain way of looking at the world around us, and we learn to see ourselves as controlling or being controlled. And so an internal locus of control, I see myself as an agent of change in the world around me. On the other hand, an external locus of control, a person sees themselves being controlled by the things around them. And these things have a direct impact on what we call instrumental activity. What that means is if I believe that I can impact the world around us, then my tendency is to act on that environment. If I believe that I don't have that kind of influence or impact, then oftentimes I won't do anything. So what that leads to is another important term in social cognitive perspective, and that term is learned helplessness. And the research was quite, whoops, I spelled it wrong, sorry. The research was quite telling. It was done by some researchers with some dogs, and they would put them in a kennel where the padding or the floor of the kennel was electrified. Now, it's not it's not like they electrocute the dogs. That's not it. It's just enough electricity to make them uncomfortable. And over time, when dogs learned the ability to get out, when they felt the electricity, they would jump out. In other cases, they would have the dogs chained into place, and the dog couldn't get out. And what eventually it did was, instead of prancing, which is a way to limit the amount of electricity that they're experiencing, eventually the dog would just simply quit. And instead of just standing still, they would lay down on their side, which would be actually exposing a greater portion of their body to the electricity itself. And so learned helplessness is a very, very important term. It plays a significant role in depression. As people get more and more depressed, the more helpless and hopeless they become. And so this same concept is quite important in abnormal psych when we talk about depression itself. All right, let's turn our attention to another concept which is equally important, and that's the idea of attributional style.